Hello everybody, welcome. My name's Katie Stotter, I'm a senior strategist here at the Bio Agency. You can tell I'm a senior strategist because my hands are covered in pen and my desk is covered in post-it notes. And welcome to Bio. Bio is a digital agency focused on innovation and transformation and creating great user experiences. And we're very happy to welcome Great Debaters Club and London Futurists, who are lovely officers, for this debate on digital dictatorship versus democracy. Just a small note on logistics. We're not due any kind of fire alarm, so if you see people running towards the door and hear a loud noise, best thing is to follow them. The stairs are in reception. If anyone needs the bathroom, there is toilets just around that corner over there. And obviously drinks and so are up here. So I'm just going to do a little introduction, just so that you know kind of why we're here at Bio as well. The state of democracy today, it's around 62% of the world population lives in an electoral democracy. There's a general trend of progress over the past few decades. But I think we can agree that as a species we've made some slightly questionable decisions lately. Trump. So perhaps it would be better to make sure that we're always making data-driven decisions. And perhaps the machines should decide what's best for us. And to be fair, they're not doing too badly. For example, last summer I had a month between jobs and I think I completed Netflix, which was due in no small part to the recommendation engine that was on it. But on the other hand, if you look at something like Amazon, which has an incredible amount of data on what people do and what the preferences are, if you buy a kettle on Amazon, the next thing it will recommend that you buy is a kettle. Not great. And this is just based on how you've used the service before, your past interactions shaping those future recommendations. But what about going beyond that? So it makes recommendations not only on how you use the service, but also who it thinks you are. And again, let's return to Amazon. The day after I turned 30, the Amazon app had decided that it no longer cared that I have a propensity to buy USB cables at 2 in the morning or to buy DVDs that I no longer have anything to play them on. It was more interested in the fact that I was then a woman over 30 and half of my app screen, my app home screen, was baby related. And this is the problem. Anytime we ask machines to make a value judgment, we have to teach it what those values mean. Human bias is in all the training data, and then we unleash those biases on ourselves over and over again. And because it's just what the data says, it's nothing personal, it's okay. At Bio, we have to deal with questions around these all the time when we look at personalization and customization of digital services. We make judgment calls, such as, who are you? What's best for you? And it's really hard. So perhaps if the machines can't know what's best for us, and how could they? Perhaps they can know what we think is best for us, using deductive versus inductive reasoning, using explicit rather than implicit personalization. This is an interesting microphone. So perhaps in the future, we can set out what we want in more explicit terms. Perhaps we have a digital passport, not only of all of our preferences, so goodbye GDPR pop-ups, so you know exactly what I want and don't want, but perhaps it also knows our values and our leanings, along with how much we care about each one of those things. And in a world of digital politics, that becomes a sort of voting passport as well. But this is to ignore the emotional component of voting, the last-minute gut feeling in the polling booth. And perhaps these are the moments in which we become our worst selves, afraid and selfish and short-sighted. Or perhaps it's this emotional component of these decisions, the compassion and the unflinching humanness that actually makes us our best selves. And today, I'm very glad that at Bio we don't quite have to answer questions quite as big as that, but you guys will do tonight, and certainly these guys will do. So without any further rambling, I'd like to one more time welcome you to Bio and introduce David, Chair of London Futurists.
Many thanks, Katie. As we've just heard, we've all got love-hate relationships with our data algorithms. Sometimes they do wonderful things for us. Sometimes they really annoy us and frustrate us, as we heard, when the same adverts keep coming back to us for things we no longer need to buy because we've already bought them. Thank you very much. And sometimes it's more serious than that. There are algorithms which do a pretty good job, sometimes, of working out what might be causing various symptoms that you have. If you are feeling ill or painful in various ways, you can type these symptoms into a modern AI, such as AI Babylon. And sometimes it will give you excellent advice, better than many real-life human doctors will give you. And this got a lot of publicity recently, understandably, on, for example, the BBC. But then various other people reported their own experiences with typing their symptoms into these algorithms and getting very bad advice, as I found out for myself. So sometimes these life and death algorithms might give us, sadly, very wrong advice. And let's just think briefly about one more example, which is the algorithms which drive our cars on our behalf. Sometimes much safer than us, but still occasionally there have been tragedies when bugs in that software have resulted in the car not being able to stop in time before knocking over an unfortunate pedestrian who was riding or pushing a push bike in an unexpected place. But as futurists, we have to observe that the technology is getting better. And even some of the examples I've mentioned about mistakes in the algorithms to figure out what we might be ill with, they're getting better day by day, week by week. And an example that I had a few weeks ago, when that software gave me the wrong advice, this afternoon gave me much, much better advice. And the algorithms which cause today, occasionally, cars to crash, will in the future surely drive much, much better than humans. So we have to look ahead, and maybe, although there will be still some bugs occasionally in such algorithms, there will be fewer bugs in these algorithms than we have in our human decision-making systems, our democracies, which do from time to time frustrate us greatly. So as futurists, we are bound to think ahead. We're bound to think that sooner or later, as algorithms, digital technology is more powerful and more persuasive, more and more people are going to say, let's have driverless government. Let's get the humans out of the way. Let's hand over to Mr. Google or Mr. whatever comes next after Google, because that will be much safer. And some people will say, this is just irresponsible science fiction, it will never happen. I think we have to have a more open mind. Some people will say, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. But I say, the future arrives unevenly. Some parts of the future are here already, if only we start looking for them. And I will make one prediction before I hand over to the actual debate. My prediction is that sometime in the next few weeks, you will see something here and now. You will be thinking about a digital technology, and part of the arguments from this debate tonight about the future will be very relevant to your decision. How should you design digital technology? How should you use digital technology? In some cases, how should you resist digital technology or beg and agitate for it to be improved? So I think this is not just a debate about some long term in the future. This is a debate that's going to impact our own lives as consumers, our own lives as business people, our own lives as citizens of what should become a wonderful democracy, whether that democracy has human voting at the top, or whether it's got Mr. Google or something else, an algorithm on top, is for the debaters now to help us decide. The person chairing the formal part of tonight's evening is Paul Carroll, who is a long-term member of the Great Debate Society. He's going to explain to you how this debate works. I have one more point for the camera. Some of the people speaking may, from time to time, express a view which isn't actually their own personal long-term health view. Sometimes in a debate, people express a view for the sake of exploring the argument. That's a very important part of the debate process. It's how we get to the truth. So please don't pull out just an abstract section of this video and say, aha, this person here was saying some foolish thing, we shouldn't pay any more attention to him or her. That's not how it works at all. Let's indeed have a more grown-up discussion. And for that, I will hand over to Paul Carroll. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we will have a traditional contrapuntal debate. We have a proposing team who will try to persuade you to support their proposition that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy. And we will have an opposing team trying to convince you of the opposite. To that end, we have certain rules and norms for debate. Each side will present its case, then it will go to you for questions from the floor. I ask in the first part, there will be a time for short statements, but for 20 minutes we will have questions, short questions, from the floor, posed to the debaters, and each side will have an opportunity to answer. Then, as I say, we will have 10 minutes of statements from the floor, and then we will have a summing up by the two sides. Traditionally, since the burden of proof is on the proposition gets the first and last word. So the opposition will close first, and then the last speaker will be from the proposition. We will take a preliminary vote just to see where the audience stands on the subject, and we will take a final vote at the end of the debate. I would like to ask for a volunteer from the front row to help me count the votes. You get to vote too, but you've got to help me count the votes. So we vote by show of hands. I will ask you to keep your hand up as high as you can, so that we can count you. And you have three options. You can be inclined for the motion. You can be for the motion. You can be against the motion, or in the preliminary round, if you want to hear from the debaters first, you may abstain in the opening vote. I would ask you also now to put your phones on silent if you do have them on. This House believes that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy. If you support that proposition, please raise your hand and hold it up now. Thank you very much. So our preliminary vote stands at 17 for the motion, 28 against, and 30 abstentions. So everything yet to play for. I will now call upon the opening speaker for the proposition to propose the motion that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy. Please welcome Sarah Al-Mahdi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow speakers, and Mr. Chairman. So I'm here to first define for you what a digital dictatorship is, and then I'll prove to you what's wrong with the current democracy that we are living in, and what the benefits and the pros and the cons are, and let you make your decision yourselves after you've reflected and deliberated. Can you hear me at the back okay?
Speak up.
Speak up, okay. All right, so first I'm going to define what a digital dictatorship is. A digital dictatorship is a digital technocracy where artificial intelligence algorithms use our data that's available digitally to make policy changes and to make decisions that currently government is making. That's what we mean by a digital dictatorship. What's wrong with what we currently have in a democracy? What we currently have in a democracy is a few fallacies. First of all, the MPs that are elected to represent us have been funded and are biased and have to implement policies that are influenced by corporate agendas and not what the public represent. A study by Gilman and Page showed that it doesn't matter what the public wants, it doesn't matter what public opinion is. What matters is what businesses want and what the professional elite wants. That's what makes policy changes. Plus, and I'll mention two negatives with our democracy: Trump and Brexit. Lots of people are not content with those decisions. 49.9% of the people voted to remain and 51.1% voted to leave. And now we're all stuck with this decision where the 51.1% have actually changed their minds a bit. So what's going on with this democracy that we have? Plus, the other factor that you need to consider is how do we make our decisions? So Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winner for behavioral economics, has defined this by saying that how we make our decisions is using system 1 and system 2. System 1 is our knee-jerk reaction that we have that's usually emotional and based in heuristics and based on our fears and just our first priming. And system 2 is what you're doing now, which I'm going to appeal to, that's based on deliberation and reflecting and looking at the facts and the evidence. And for most Homo sapiens, we do not use system 2. It requires so much energy. Imagine if you have to make every single decision using the slow process of system 2. You'd be knackered by the end of the day. So how we've evolved as human beings is to make our decisions based on system 1. And this you've seen in the American elections recently, where public opinion was influenced by so-called meddling from Russia and by Cambridge Analytica, profiling patients on Facebook and targeting people to figure out what their current opinions are and advertising for them and preaching for them to vote for this side or that side. So the democracy that actually we think is a genuine democracy was heavily influenced by our system 1. Where are the refugees that are all coming in for Brexit? Where is the 300 million that was promised for the NHS? All these fears and all these anxieties that were tapped into was what made the public decide on Brexit and on Trump. Hence, the democracy that we have isn't a genuine democracy that's representing what the people want. What we're proposing is to use big data for research purposes and to take all that data to learn more about ourselves, to gain insight into our habits and our behaviors, and to find out what we need from that. So we input that into AI. AI can process all this data better than any other human who can be biased. And after they process it, they can implement strategies and interventions to help improve our society. We need to safeguard this process by making sure that data protection and privacy laws are respected. We need to make sure that the data is anonymized so that personal data isn't available out there. And we need to make sure that when a government body is using this information, it's using it ethically and not abusing it for any other purposes that are motivated by financial interest. It needs to be in the best interest of the public, for the public. Businesses are already using this and harnessing all the data that we have via our digital footprint. Every time you log into any website, you have to agree to cookies and consent to this, and no one reads that 30-page document. Everyone just clicks agree, 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 and we've already handed over that data to businesses. Why not hand it to the government to help make public policy and to help make improvements in all the different sectors in the government? Examples of where this can be made is in the NHS, where they found out that cancer rates are being diagnosed much later than in the UK than in Europe, and they figured out that all the diagnosis is happening at A&E. So they've put in initiatives to help educate GPs and educate the public of how to pick up cancer symptoms earlier. That helped reduce mortality and reduce morbidity. This is all based on big data that was available that can only be processed by AI. So instead of believing in a false democracy or a fallacy that we have, where we're actually making these decisions based on intellectual debates, these decisions are not based on intellectual debates, and they're based on different biases, human bias or vested interests from different big corporations. So we need to wake up to the truth and accept that actually AI will give us insight into our data. Google does know us more than we know ourselves, because there's stuff that you do in there that no one else knows that you get up to. And if we harness all that data, we can use it to put it back into an algorithm where we can improve the different sectors of society, be it education, healthcare, transport, even if it's more options and choices that you want, which represents what a democracy is. However, we use AI and your big data. Thank you.
For the benefit of the audience members who might not know it, a single gavel is the 1 minute warning for a speaker. To open for the opposition that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy, please welcome Tony Katsumbus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for introducing us, and to Sarah for opening tonight's debate. Quick question: if I just speak free sans microphone, can everyone hear me at the back? Okay. Right, I'm just going to do that just to stop my voice from fluctuating at all. All right. Okay. So Sarah has neatly introduced tonight's debate by essentially telling you that that AI is more likely to produce more informed decisions than human beings. We do not contest this. If that's what this debate is purely about, then we're going to agree with them. What this debate is really about, ladies and gentlemen, is what do you value more when making big decisions? The outcome of that decision or the way it's taken, the process of taking that decision? That's what this debate is about. And what lies underneath Sarah's very eloquent case in favour of tonight's motion are a few key assumptions that I want to explore to make sure you know what you're voting for if you do decide to go with the proposition tonight. Evan, on the other hand, is going to explore a little more about what the democratic process involves, what are some of the initial flaws of that Sarah quite rightly highlighted, and what are some of the ways that we can go about resolving and improving the process of democracy in order to help deal with some of the problems, legitimate problems, that Sarah raised. So what are those three things that we feel the other side we need to prove to you tonight to win this debate? And well, the first thing we need to prove to you is what I just said, that the outcome of the decision matters more than how it's taken. The second thing they need to prove to you is that civil rights in their worldview, in the future view they portrayed for you, that civil rights are an obstacle to good governance. The third thing they need to prove to you, to convince you, is that the public good can be measured on a single objective scale. If they can do all three of those things tonight, ladies and gentlemen, vote for them, by all means. But I want to try and explore those assumptions and show you why I don't think they can or have done that. So, on the first point, why do you think it's important for them to demonstrate that the outcome matters more than process when you entrust an AI with making decisions for us? Well, for two reasons. First of all, because in this vision they've created for us, which will get entertained that it's possible to exist, we're going to test that, you give AI a monopoly on what is the public good, which therefore cannot be challenged or scrutinized. It is the word, so to speak. And second thing is the opaque nature of algorithmic decision-making that makes it very hard to understand how those decisions are reached. In fact, this is a big cause of concern for the House of Commons Science and Technology Select Committee, which is reviewing this in May of this year. They refer to the secretive nature of technology companies who are solely responsible for these algorithms that are used to influence these massive decisions that they want to scale up to determine all of our lives, the entire public life. They're concerned about that nobody could understand how these algorithms were made and how decisions were being made as a result. They also conceded that even if they did disclose those details, we probably wouldn't be able to understand them. And that contrasts with democracy. The way we make laws right now is that we understand how they're made. They are debated openly, we are free to scrutinize them and challenge them, and most importantly of all, if we don't like the outcome of those decisions, then we can vote out the people responsible for them and replace them with somebody else. Because in democracy, we don't assume that anybody has a monopoly on what constitutes the public good. I'm going to come to that bit and talk about that a little bit more in a brief moment. In the world they've portrayed, public debates, public votes, elections, judicial oversight, free press become pointless because there is only one definition of public good and there is no way any of us can make sense of how decisions that govern our lives are made in the first place. So you have to decide if you're happy to give that up. Which brings me to my second point, because that doesn't automatically mean they lose tonight, because it may be the case actually benefits of these decisions may just be great enough that it's worth giving up all those things. So let me talk a little bit about what they would need to do, or this AI would need to do in order to be able to achieve this. Because they talked about bias. And really what bias is making judgments without having a full picture of what is going on around you. In other words, without having all the data. Now, AI algorithms are just as prone to this as humans are. There's an interesting case, for example, where police authorities in the United States that wanted to use facial recognition technology to improve detection rates actually found that error rates went up because the data they were basing it on were pretty grainy police photos of wanted people. So the data really determines the accuracy of the judgment, which means that we would need to allow this AI entity to collect as much data as it possibly could on all of us to ensure that all its judgments were as accurate as possible, because after all, it would be judged based on the outcome of the decision, not on the process. Which means that you would not have the right to conceal any of your data. So if any of you use end-to-end encryption, for example, to conceal financial transactions that you don't want to be disclosed, or to send photos of yourselves you'd rather not other people see, for example, or if to transfer important documents. If any of you choose that you don't want to use social media, or you'd rather live off the grid, that wouldn't be an option because the stakes would be so high in this entity, the whole benefit of society would depend on this AI entity having up to the minute accurate data. And we've seen what world that operates on that basis looks like. It looks a little bit like the social credit system in China, which merges big data with Big Brother. And that finally brings me to that last point, which is all of that is assumed would still be okay if we come up with a single definition of what constituted the public good. Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't been able to do that ourselves over the last several thousand years we've been tagged enough to debate it. And yet we are the ones who are responsible for programming the moral compass of this AI, the same human beings that Saraiva here thinks are too frail and flawed to be able to govern themselves. Everyone's going to carry on a little bit and tell you about why we think actually democracy is worth explaining in the first place, but these are the reasons why we think that digital dictatorship is innately flawed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. To speak in favor of the proposition that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy, please welcome Matthew Gosselin.
We take democracy for granted. Of course, that's the best. But is it true? Well, we could judge the quality of a governmentation based on how it improved the life of people. And even though in Europe we have democracies, the presidents have less favorable opinions than the president of China, who has not been elected democratically, but whom people believe are dramatically improving their life, because from their own perspective, it's getting better. But what's better, really? And that's the answer to my opponent, which is it's up to us to define it and perhaps to tend towards something. We don't have to get the definition right the first time, but we can iterate and improve. However, we might start with some ideas, some common grounds that lots of people agree with, and that will be sustainable individual well-being. We all want a better life. We all want to be happier, and not just now, but sustainably. We also want societal well-being. So we want all of the people to be satisfied in their lives. And we want as well environmental well-being. And that's the problem of politicians, because the environment doesn't have a voice. So by using a proxy of that, we set the rules in a certain way, we can give the voice to the voiceless planet. I can see so many issues with democracy that I had to make a list. Oh yes, so one example of how I can think of you can constantly improve your definition of the better is how they do for the esports. So much like Warcraft or League of Legends, they constantly refine the game to make it fair between the different playing strategies. So there is a case to be made that the system could be improved by just versioning it and moving faster and faster towards the better good. So it's possible because it's been done in another context. So the problem I see with democracy, well, first humans don't know what is good for them. because it's difficult to judge something without enough information. And that's why we have professional judges, and they have to listen to different perspectives before making an opinion. But we ask people to form an opinion on things they don't really understand. And so how qualitative is their judgment, really? People vote for who they think has a chance to win, as opposed to what they really believe in, just because that's the only option that's offered to them. And if they disagree with some part of the policy, well, that's too bad. It's the whole package that you have to swallow. And no politician is held accountable for keeping their words. People's opinion can be shaped and transformed via the media, via social media, and the interest of, the oligarchy, you could say. And that's the case with Trump, if you know the subject. Okay, I'm going to move on to the point. And before democracy was experimented in Greece, Plato, in his book Republic, rated it fourth in terms of how good it would be as a system to rule over people. And in second was democracy, so the bravest rules. In third, oligarchy, the richest rule. And in fourth, democracy, which he saw as the tyranny of the masses. And in five, tyranny. So what was first for him? Well, what we call newcracy, or aristocracy of the wise. And you probably heard this idea before, the idea of the philosopher king, as someone who will be detached from desire and will not seek personal gain. Well, that's very much the definition of an algorithm and a program. It doesn't have any bias. And so for me, it's not people who should win, it's the best ideas. It should be facts, data, and the best ideas. So imagine reason ruling our policies. I find it interesting. Imagine a GPS for how we should move and navigate in the world. We choose where we want to go, but it's going to tell us the best way to get there. And if we go on our own, it might be a lot more difficult. And that's the same. And so the only safeguard I will put is that be careful what you ask the genie, because whatever you ask will happen. So indeed, we have to make the definition clear, and we have to experiment before we increase it in large scale. But so did we with democracy. Democracy didn't just came out of the blue and was perfect. It took hundreds of years of refinement and experimentation. And I think the secret for better society is this incremental improvement, but we don't allow the space for a redesign of our institution, and that's the problem. And it's not just making new laws and so on. The apparel of democracy as it is today is just not efficient. And so, but I believe also we need to educate people on the data, give them literacy as to why decisions have been made in a certain way, and the machine could very well translate in clear terms how they took a decision. And finally, final point, I think, what was it? Yeah, we just have to combine the diversity and homogeneity. That's really what we're all about. We're all different, but we have to learn to work together, including the environment. And that's why I believe that we should put the ideas and data and design the rules of the game so it works for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And to oppose the motion that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy, please welcome Evan Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the proposers of this motion have a clue what, if you unleash AI, or artificial superintelligence, which is coming on stream in about 20 years' time, on the general public, what it will do. It spells the end of humanity. You think I'm joking? That is what Stephen Hawking reckons. It's what Elon Musk great visionary things, it is incredibly dangerous to do that. So no way can you let artificial intelligence, and particularly artificial superintelligence, which would be cleverer than all of you a million times over, and do everything you can do better, faster, you're going to be nowhere near. It will ruin humanity. We'll end up on a cruise ship of artificial intelligence, mindless, meaningless life. That is coming. Now, you rightly pointed out that democracy isn't right. Representative democracy is a total mess. I absolutely agree with you. And that's where the energy and efforts must go. We must think, representative democracy invented hundreds of years ago, in a time that was very different to ours. The aristocracy, they wanted to control the peasants. Actually, it's not very different now. It's the establishment and the money who control us. About 1% do what they ask us to do. You're asked to vote once every 5 years to put another party in place. It's Tweedledum or it's Tweedledee, because they're working in the same system. What you have to do is radically reform the way we do democracy. And that is what I think will take us to a much improved society. There's many calls for this now. My favourite one, I think the one that has real traction, is direct democracy, where every individual is involved in running their society, be it at a local level or be it at the national level. That's what we have to implement. And already ordinary citizens have been taken aside for a period of time. They've been asked to consider a very important question. They get incredibly well informed. They then deliberate. They then declare on it. This has happened in Ireland, where they did the abortion and the gay marriage element. The government went to this so-called Citizens' Assembly to get steerage on this. This is what now our Parliament is also doing. There's two calls now. They're looking at how to pay for social care for people like me, old buggers. And they actually put that out to a Citizens' Assembly because they don't know what to do. It's a hot potato. Look what happened with Theresa May when she proposed something vaguely intelligent in the last election. What did the Labour Party call it? The dementia tax. Absolute. That's what politicians do. So the whole political system needs a radical reform. Matthew Taylor of the RSA is trying to get Citizens' Assembly on the statute books in this country. Ultimately, you can imagine a Citizens' Assembly actually in the House of Commons, where they take decisions for the greater good. All the other structures there remain the same. The civil service, all the advice remains the same. It's ordinary people who make a decision, not politicians who are generally driven by party political dogma, often by money, by lobbying, which you know nothing about. And of course they're whipped, aren't they? So they take decisions in order to hold on to power. If you vest power in individuals, you create problems, as we all know. Corruption. And so our politicians have not delivered well in many areas. They particularly have failed miserably in the capitalist arena. This is where we get people who earn huge sums of money by essentially renting out their Uber system or their Airbnb. We don't like that. We're going to object to that. That's what brought on Brexit and Trump, I don't doubt. And I really have to finally query what you think AI is going to do. I don't think it's going to get too close to handling things like war, like climate change, pandemics. These are things that come along and can impact our life big time. Mass immigration. What's AI going to help us there? Brexit. Can you imagine AI helping us how we handle Brexit, for example, and how we divide up the spoils of our economic activity? Basically, all those things are fundamentally chaotic processes. There is an algorithm for a chaotic process, so forget it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Proposition and opposition have set their cases before you, so I would like now to take some questions. A question can be directed to one side or the other, or general, but each side will have a chance to respond to it. So the first hand I saw was that gentleman right there.
A question for the proposition. Compass is a piece of software used in the United States by the court system, and it's supposed to predict how likely someone is to reoffend. There's 137 survey questions, and then the software spits out a result, and that informs bail decisions. ProPublica, a bunch of journalists looked at it and concluded that it was biased against blacks. Is that the future that you're proposing?
Okay, so when you have all this data available, you have to use it by making sure that you're not going to discriminate against race or ethnic origin or religion or sexual orientation or any of these factors. The fact that in America they found that a higher population of people recommitting crime happened to be black. We need to address the other issues of why the low socioeconomic status associated with ethnic minorities has resulted in these crimes being committed. So don't address the data that you have on the surface, dig deeper and figure out what are the causes. Why is there a higher risk of crime in the community? It's not the AI that's telling you that you have to racially profile every black person and assume that they're criminal. This is the data that's available, and you have to find out further information and dig deeper. As Compass is using this data to show you the reoffending rates, there's judges that can also be biased and can judge differently. There was a study that showed that judges who had lunch and judges who didn't have lunch had harsher sentences. If you were just hungry, you just gave a longer sentence than someone else who isn't, and that was a validated study. So put a human being in there, and that's even more biased. The AI will help you address more factors and find out more demographics and address the core issues. Thank you.
Opposition? Yes, I'm glad gentlemen brought up Compass. I was looking into this before the debate, and perhaps, actually just to clarify, I should go on the record, I strongly doubt it is the intention of the other side in any way to design a system of government that discriminates against minorities. Let's just get on the record. I'm sure that's not their intention, irrespective of whether it's a consequence or not. However, what's particularly galling about the Compass example is that there's a different actually example of a defendant, a convict rather, who wanted to understand how his sentence had been calibrated, because Compass was used to determine how long a sentence should be, and he decided to appeal because it wasn't clear to him exactly on what grounds it was deemed that he would be such a threat to society that he would need to be in jail for such a period of time, and his request was denied on the grounds that this technology was commercially sensitive and therefore no one should have the right to be able to access or determine how this decision was reached. How can you scrutinise it? How can you go to appeals court and decide whether to overturn the sentence or not, whether it's been proportionate or disproportionate? So, whatever the other side say about AI is so superior to humans, it will come up with brilliantly objective decisions. If we have no way of telling that it's coming up with brilliantly objective decisions, there's no transparency, then how can we be sure it's not actually coming up with decisions that whoever programmed that particular AI wanted to come up with?
Question, and lady right here.
Hello, I'm from China, and now I'm studying here. So I have a question for the pro side. Now let's talk about education. In China, now AI and face recognition is used in the school. Okay, there's a news. This is a real news, real thing. That one senior high school in Zhejiang province in China, they used the AI and face recognition to analyze the students' facial expressions in the class. And the school said they want to analyze the data from the students, whether they are concentrating on the study, or they are happy or sad or upsetting or other things. So just to check if the teacher is really doing a good lesson to students, and if they want to check if the students are really pay attention to the
Question.
Okay, so my question is, do you think this act can be benefit for students' psychological, mental health development? Thank you.
So I'm completely agnostic on the subject, and for me, your question is like, okay, do you think it's gonna influence them psychologically? Well, if you care about the truth and reason, you will measure that as well. You will say, oh, is it a problem for the people if they are being measured? And if that's a problem, then indeed you need to do something about it. And so it's not about my opinion, what I believe. It's about, okay, how do we define what's best for people? And indeed, by doing this intervention, is it providing a better educational system? Is it just an isolated experiment that will later on maybe lead to bigger benefit to society? Because they discover that by using either this teaching method or this teaching method, children learn better, they are more fulfilled, they are more ready for the environment. It's all about how you really, in my area, which is kind of a startup world, we use what we say KPI, so key performance indicators that will that you look at to say, oh, I'm being successful, so I'm improving the system, and it's about how you define it really, because if your only metrics is success, or it's like performance, maybe you won't have a good system. But if your metrics is to prepare individual and to be healthy mentally and perform well, and your cohesion between individual is important, and the harmony between the teacher is important, then it's gonna figure out what are the best parameters to make that happen.
Do you think
we can't re-debate back and forth. Any response from the opposition?
Not really.
So it's an interesting point that Mathieu made, which kind of goes to the heart of this debate, because he kept saying, well, it depends how you measure success. That's kind of the point, Mathieu, that what you are proposing to do is to outsource that to an AI entity. And the issue is here that of the thousands of years, right back to Plato that you were referring to in your speech, that we have been trying to debate how you would measure success, especially in terms of the wider public good. What does success mean for making life better for all of society? We have been unable to agree on anything. Democracy evolved as a way of resolving that dilemma, which says, you know what, maybe there isn't an objective measure of the public good. Maybe it's subjective, and maybe therefore the way we keep society going is by putting in charge whoever can persuade the most other people to agree with that subjective view of morality. And if they disagree with it, or if they find that it delivers outcomes that are not as positive as they thought it would be, they retain faith in that system, that process, because they have a chance to vote out that person, replace them with someone else, replace them with a different vision. If you get a definition of how you measure success wrong, when you do empower some AI entity to govern over all of us, you can't just vote it out after that. You can't change your mind after that.
I really have to say that both sides are guilty of completely underestimating what AI can do. And we shouldn't be talking about AI, we should be talking about artificial superintelligence, because that is coming. And the other thing about education that is maybe a fantastic way of assessing people, not as you do education well in China, like we do in our country. And I think that's one of the big things that we should be thinking about beyond reforming democracy.
Now I'm going to ask all the questioners, just please be short, and answerers, please be short. There's this gentleman in the front who gets to ask a question because he helped me.
Thank you. So this is a question to the proposition. So essentially, you mentioned that digital dictatorship is a rule by an AI-empowered technocrat. And then also, as one of the claims of your argument, you also mentioned about Plato's skepticism of democracy because of the tyranny of the masses. Isn't a digital dictatorship simply the tyranny of a technologically empowered system? That's my question.
We have a few technocracies that are good examples that are amongst us. There's Singapore, which uses a technocracy and the elite or professionals who decide on public policy and look at their economy and their development and their well-being. We have Switzerland, which is a technocracy plus a democracy as well, and they again use the elite to decide what policy to change. So human beings are biased, and if you introduce artificial intelligence to collect all this data, you eliminate that bias and you remove it and use an objective parameter to meet your needs. AI will actually know what you need better than what you think you need. It will tell you, if it gives you a salad or a cookie, you're going to go for the cookie, right? But you're supposed to go for the salad. So AI will just guide you and tell you to go for the salad. That's what's healthier. Another human being will be biased and will say, go on, follow your instincts and take the cookie instead, and that will be harmful for you. Human beings decide instinctively on a knee-jerk reaction at the moment and an acute vision. They don't see the long distance, long vision.
So last time I checked, Switzerland was like one of the most democratic countries in the world, where they kind of decide everything by pretty much the model that Evan was describing in his speech, which is direct democracy pretty much all the way, which has positive and negative consequences. What Sarah's referring to when he talks about technocracies is really how technology can actually enhance democratic governance, because both Singapore, but definitely Switzerland have elected governments ultimately who make the final call on policy. Both of them have humans, in other words, running the show. And technology is very useful in enhancing those processes. In kind of the classroom example was a good example of that. But what they're talking about is replacing it with a dictatorship by technology. So the question Shireen needs to answer is, are there any examples of successful dictatorships anywhere in the world?
Would anyone like to ask a question particularly to the opposition?
Absolutely.
To the opposition. All right. A woman standing all the way in the back.
Hello, this is for the opposition. We've heard an awful lot about artificial superintelligence. What do you mean by that? And can you give me some examples of the harm it can do to humanity?
Artificial intelligence has been around for really quite some time.
But they're working, and it's courtesy of what they call machine learning. The actual machine adapts itself, courtesy of using neural networks, which is very similar to the way our brain works. So they feed back the information and they reprogram themselves. Now, that has only just started. That's going to have a dramatic impact on what artificial intelligence can do. It will be not only deep learning, which it currently does quite well, it will also be lateral. It will be able to manage things in a lateral thinking way. So it's going to dramatically change how we do things. It really is, it's a major question whether we will be needed other than for the other jobs. And there'll be a lot of people who are just not needed once you get artificial superintelligence going. That's why Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk say it is an existential threat. Humanity will become virtually meaningless and very, very superficial.
Frank, would you like to reply?
Yeah, I believe the threat of superintelligence is very real, actually. I mean, it's not null, it's not impossible. And so I do not contest the fact that, you know, superintelligence could be a problem, but I think it's completely irrelevant to the debate, because if you let you know, the Googles and the corporation of this world get on that bandwagon and just develop it, well, what is their goal? What is their incentive to use superintelligence for? And AI, you know, we kind of think it's a free agent, but not really. We decide what it does. So we set the parameters of it's a program, really. You think of artificial intelligence, but it's more. We're gonna design the way that you're gonna think. And also it's up to us to be really careful and sandbox things, so those programs don't do something against us. Of course, we have to make sure that they do not have the means of agency. So they will just give you information for people to act upon it, as opposed to they will act upon it without our consent. And that's definitely, I think, the wise way to go forward.
Gentleman in the second row.
Thank you.
I've got a question for the opposition, which is, before AI is able to make decisions, it will need to have a model of what its decisions might do to the world and how the world works. What can existing democracies do if they get access to that model, or ideally multiple different models, so that you have an AI-empowered human democracy rather than an AI decision-maker? Is that a good halfway house?
For sure, when people are running our society, as a method that I prefer infinitely, ordinary people, yes, they can be informed by artificial intelligence for sure, and they will be. But it will be an input. It'll just be input to their deliberation. And as like any referendum result, when they go out and make referendum, as they do in Switzerland on a regular basis, a citizens' assembly in Parliament will also go out regularly and ask people their opinions on big issues. They can do that very easily these days. It will be but an input. It will not be binding like it was in the silly referendum that we had in 2016.
Proposition?
So the model that you're proposing will also be designed by a human being, and an algorithm will be put in there for the AI to follow. And it will be your values and your beliefs and your dreams and your hopes and your aspirations that are put in the model, and the data will be collected and harnessed in order to implement what you need. So by asking a survey of a small people of population, that you're misrepresenting the whole population. That's a small sample that might be 0.01% of what the rest want. So it's better to get big data to answer your questions that you need using an AI algorithm.
So, gentleman there, yes, right there with a striped shirt and spectacles.
Thank you. Is that? You can hear me? Yeah. It's a question for the proposers, but the obverse of the question needs also to be answered. And it's a very simple question. You have a lot of faith in technology. Can you give me one example of where the application of data and algorithms has made the world materially better for everybody? Yeah? The obverse of the question for the opposers is, can you give me an example of a situation where the application of algorithms and data has made the world worse for everybody?
So the police forces are already using artificial intelligence to predict the statistic of where crime might happen. And it's one of the most powerful tools that the police ever had to prevent crime. And so that's already something that, you know, if your neighborhood is safer, you can already thank algorithm for that. Or you could say that lots of people, so I used to work on with Nike, and so Nike Plus, for instance, is a means of using data to improve your life, because it's gonna help you keep track of your goals. It's gonna so you know this data, you can act upon it, and you want to keep it around. It's almost set up like a game, really. But what games are, they're really adaptation of the human drives, because we drive for growth. And by leveraging this data, we can make better informed decisions. And lots of people have improved their diet, their well-being by going running and keeping their, you know. And will you rather make an educated decision or an uneducated decision? Before it was difficult to collect all this data because we had just humble means of getting this information. It's like the voting system. But now the resolution is so large that finally you will be able to have a much better representation of what people want than just a vote. A vote is a very binary thing. And then you just speak like big clouds of ideas instead of, you know, being specific.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. I think we actually had one example earlier from another member of the audience earlier, where we were referring to Compass and how their decisions end up discriminating against black people. But there is perhaps an even broader example that I refer to that I'm particularly concerned about, which is the role of algorithms in the social credit system currently being used in China that I referred to earlier. So the way this works, a little bit like our credit score system, but rather than measuring your credit worthiness and ability to pay back your debts, this more measures how good a citizen you are. And it makes use of the fact that China is, compared to our standards, a mass surveillance state, where it's much easier to monitor your activity in social media, to monitor things like how long you spend on the internet playing video games, because you have to enter your ID card registration number in order to access them. And that's one example, thank you, that's one example of that being used, that if you happen to play loads of hours on a computer game, that will affect your ability to get, say, as good options on insurance schemes or access to the same kind of discount prices on airlines available to people who are judged to be better citizens than you because they're deemed to be spending their time more productively, all of which can be measured thanks to the use of big data collated using algorithms created by AI. And the reason why there's such a concern is precisely because this is all predicated on one definition of what constitutes the public good. It happens to fly in the face of what everyone here might describe as being the public good. It's quite possible everyone in China thinks that is a good definition of the public good and would react with similar adversity to my definition, or your definition of public good. The issue we have here is that we have no system, and no system has been proposed for defining whose version of the public good do we use in order to decide who wins and who loses. At least in a democracy, if I lose, I can protest, I can call for judicial review, I can vote a party who's made a decision out of office, I can form a party myself, I can run for office and get elected and persuade other people to back me in order to follow my agenda, and if it doesn't work out, they can vote me out. Where is that safeguard in their system?
Okay, now, so we've had 20 minutes of Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes left. We won't have questions anymore, but if you'd just like to make a point, then the teams will possibly address your point or allay your concerns. And if you can make your point in under a minute, we can have more than 10 people. So there's a gentleman sitting right there.
Hi. This is mainly directed to the proposers. I'm concerned that maybe the actual point that we are debating is not made clear. We're not discussing whether or not data-driven decision-making or a technocracy is a better system than democracy. We are not discussing the flaws of democracy. They are many, and we have discussed them for hundreds of years. Your point that I think you might have been trying to argue is that a AI-driven dictatorship, whose decision is final and absolute, is the social good that you would strive for. And part of your point is that you point to the biases that are inherent in democracies, human biases. I wonder how aware you are of the way a node changes as a neural network evolves from generation to generation, how a node increases or decreases its weight to the decision-making output of that algorithm, and how bias is an inherent and essential part of how AI works. The difference between democratic human bias and AI bias is that we can go back and forensically analyze who was corrupt, what corrupted them, and where they went astray. AI has no mechanism of doing this. We cannot forensically go back in and find not only which generation of evolution it made its mistake, but which of its many thousands of nodes is biased against the result that we may, after the fact, decide was incorrect.
Thank you very much. There's a hand, yes, there's a hand right there, yes. Him standing, yes.
Thanks. So, interesting point by the opposition about direct democracy in Switzerland. It's something I've quite been into in the past. The reason I think it works very well is that the population respect the result. Even if it's a tight vote, they still respect the result. But in the UK, we had a vote 2 years ago, and people are still trying to overturn it. So I think the main obstacle to putting direct democracy into a lot of Western societies is that people, it's great if they win, I think it's a great idea, but if they lose, they're not good losers, and they don't accept the result, they don't move on. I've voted, I've won, I've voted, I've lost, I accept the result and move on. Everyone does.
There's a gentleman here, and then back there. So there's a gentleman in the second yes.
But when I can shout, I would like to put to the all the panelists the idea that we should actually go straight to the sort of cut to the chase, and in this country that our House of Commons should be, there should be any elected representatives. They should be chosen randomly, like jurors, serve for maybe 2 years, and you would then have a totally representative House of Commons. 650 people would be like people, and if you could trust the people, they would then get on with it. And you'd have select committees, you'd have, I mean, the civil service would run the country. The civil service needs a bit of strengthening, actually, so I'm told by civil service, not quite up to it at the moment, but civil service run the country as they do now, and you wouldn't have general elections on here. You would not be voting for parties, you would not be voting for individual people, because the Greeks, who you were trying to, I think, knew that that was an absolute high road to tyranny. And so you avoid tyranny. We've seen it. Think of Zimbabwe today, spot Mugabe for the crocodile. Think of our country here with snap elections and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, I was going to go down the other side, but yes, gentleman standing.
I think we have two problems here. The first one is the definition, what we mean by the digital dictatorship and democracy. Well, I skipped that. I think the more important question is the time horizon. What kind of democracy, artificial intelligence, are we talking about? Evan spoke precisely about the superintelligence, and I agree with most of what you said. Fortunately, I have a different view, because yours is a very negative one. It doesn't follow that it has to be malevolent superintelligence, can be benevolent superintelligence. And what it depends on, and it relates to democracy as well, is on a system of value. It's the skill that we will have as humanity, how we transfer our values to superintelligence. If we do it intelligently, we are winners.
the gentleman here with the, yes, you.
Thank you. Feasibility aside, which is always a question for this kind of technologies, it seems to me the longer we debate, the less there is a difference between digital dictatorship, as we choose to call it for this debate, and the direct democracy implemented at scale. The only way a direct democracy can be implemented at scale, and not only on the most burning issues.
Thank you for that very short point. Yes, woman there with her hand raised.
Yes, one of the things that I don't think we've talked enough about is that part of being human is our sense of agency. And I worry that if we pretend that we're going to be happy under a rational dictatorship, then we're going to have a lot of problems. And I think we are heading for a lot of very unhappy people if their sense of agency and sense of control, personal control, is removed.
Thank you. Is there a gentleman behind you?
Yeah. So one point, primarily for the opposition, while I do agree largely that human beings should have agency, one aspect that appears frequently on the digital landscape is people willing to give up their privacy, their data, and anyone in the room that has a Fitbit or has put pictures up on Facebook. So the vote against your proposal has fundamentally already been cast. And people are willing to side with convenience and ease if it produces the correct results, rather than maintain their own privacy and autonomy. And on top of that, a lot of the points raised today were primarily not against the use of the superintelligence, but I do agree with the level of threat, but largely with the way it is implemented. And if we can find a way to optimize a whole range of variables that we quantify as better society, wouldn't it work out better in the long run?
Okay, one more gentleman here.
I think one point that was not stressed enough is, although you may have the super intelligence and artificial intelligence, somebody still needs to design it. Like the big design question disappeared, and I'd like you to probably consider a lot of the democratic things that have transpired before, because we probably need to choose these people, and unless you're going to get the machine to choose the people that designs the machine, I still think there's a place for both sides of this argument to work together. So that's it.
Thank you very much. We are on a time limit, so we've had a good Q&A session and then short statements. So I'm going to ask the opposition to sum up their case, and I will give a 30-second warning gavel. Who will sum up for the opposition? Okay, to sum up for the opposition, please welcome back Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to our honourable opponents, and of course to all of you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, that have made this such an interesting debate. So it seems to me there are two real questions that we sought to answer over the course of tonight's debate, certainly in this audience discussion, and they're going to us like this. Can AI and in the future artificial superintelligence, AI, enhance democracy? Yes. Can AI make democracy work better than it currently does? Yes. Should it replace democracy altogether? No. That's pretty much a pretty good summary of exactly where we stand on this side of the debate. But to give you a few more specifics, one of the things that really stood out about the proposition's proposal, and certainly your comments, is that a world in which we are governed by algorithm is a world where decisions are final, where they are opaque and inscrutable and impossible to scrutinize, impossible to challenge, and one where if we don't like the outcome, we disagree with the outcome, irrespective of what this AI overlord, a king, whatever you want to call it, decides is best for us, we have no means to challenge it or to overcome it. And that is perhaps the biggest problem for us on this side of the debate. Democracy does not pretend to come up with the right answers and deliver the best outcome. outcomes. If you're looking for the best outcomes, then AI probably is the way forward. But the issue we have is that nobody here has been able to tell us what the best outcome looks like, or who is in a position to define what constitutes a best outcome. In that scenario, the very best we can do is come up with a system that allows us to reconcile our competing versions of what the best outcome looks like, use our powers of persuasion through open debate like this to persuade other people to back our particular view of what the best outcome looks like, try it out, and that's certainly where technology comes in to help us implement those policies and make them work as best as possible. And if they don't work, they can throw us out, because we can do that. The gentleman over here mentioned, if we can come up with a way to implant our values on ASI, solve all the problems we identified, then that would be a world in which AI would work. Fantastic. And if that is possible, that's all the more reason to then change our mind, because we can do that in democracies. That's a wonderful thing about them. And that's the whole point we want to make. We want to live in a world where we can change our mind and understand how decisions are made. If we can't do that, we don't want to live in that world. Thank you.
And to sum up for the proposition, please welcome back Sarah.
So Tony has just fought the argument for me by saying the best outcomes will be reached by AI. And let me remind you that the motion of this proposition is digital dictatorship will create a better society. And what we meant by digital dictatorship is using our data in an AI algorithm to get you a better outcome. How we measure that better outcome actually depends on the statistics and the data that you give us. There's GDP that we can measure, there's environmental factors that we can measure, the list goes on, there's a social progress index, there's so many objective measures that we can measure, but it's actually your data. The data's coming from you. You're telling us whether you're happy with this or not happy with this. You're telling us whether you're healthy or unhealthy. You're telling us whether you're being productive or unproductive, and that's what actually generates the question. It's the data that generates the question that we need to ask. With respect to the design of the AI algorithms, I'm not an IT consultant. I'll leave that to the specialists because I trust the specialists in being able to design it. And if it is wrong, we can fix it. There's an upgrade. In democracy, you can change your mind, but in AI, we have upgrades and upgrades, and there's constantly improvements that are happening. With a digital dictatorship or a technocracy, we use that data and we reflect on it. With a democracy, what Evans was tapping into is this super AI and all the fear-mongering that's going on. He's tapping into your system one, that system one that made us do the wrong decisions, acting on our emotions and our impulses. I need you to act on facts and on data and on information about you to decide what happens to you on an individual level, on a society level, on a global level. And this is where the philosopher king comes, where the philosopher king is acting in the best interest of society, not in the best interest of someone who's doing a knee-jerk reaction to something that they just ate just 5 minutes ago. So I ask you to support the motion to help give you insight into yourselves and find out more about our society to make our decisions. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank all our speakers, and especially all our questioners and floor contributors, for making this a very interesting, thought-provoking, and for me, highly informative to date. And it's time for our final vote. And can I ask the microphone steward if you can take this now, if you will help me with the vote. So I would like now to ask for the final vote. This House believes that a digital dictatorship will deliver a better society than democracy. If you support the proposition, please raise your hand now and keep them up, please. Is that up? Is that right? Opposed? microphone coming down the aisle for you. How many did you do? 36. Anyone abstaining? Yes, we like to get the...
Can I still abstain? I thought there is no second.
Well, did you already vote?
Yeah, I voted as opposed.
Okay, all right, then you voted as opposed. Now it's too late to change your mind. 1, 2, 3. Is that 10 or 11? Okay, well, with a final count at 18 for the motion, 36 against, and 11 abstentions, the motion has been defeated. Congratulations to the opposition. I would like to say, I would like just now to hand over back to our sponsors.
So if you like that debate, if you want to learn more about other debates, you've got two options. You can use the AI method of a web search to do a web search for Great Debates Club, or Debaters Club, or you can use the human volition method of actually going up and talking to either Tony or to Paul or to Sarah during the informal break we're going to have now.
We can fill one of these.
You need to fill one of these. So this is the halfway house method. For those who feel like me, like abstaining for this debate, you know what to do. If you're interested in broader discussions about the future, if you're interested more in what is this super intelligence really going to be like, how can we ensure that it will turn out to be wonderfully good rather than terrible, or if you're interested in other aspects about the future, like the future of healthcare, or our next meeting is on the future of driverless cars, then again you've got the option. You can either Google London Futurists or speak to several of the London Futurists in this room. I'd like to give a special thank you to Paul, who's done an excellent job in keeping this whole debate going with his presence, his authority, with his knowledge, and that's very useful. So let's thank Paul. Especially, we'd like to thank Bio for having the courage to host such an edgy debate. It shows a great deal about your confidence and your interest in the future and the awareness that this isn't just a far distant thing, it's something which is here and now too. Matthias, you've had your hand up so high. Are you going to make a very quick point?
Very quick. Just a technical thing. If it be possible, I think it would be a much more lively debate or interesting if the opposition, or sorry, the proposition for it was actually AI super intelligence. So if you could look at
So we are going to bring AI super intelligence to win this debate. We're going to have a debating on both sides of the debate. Sometime maybe 2045 with probability 50%, 2025 with probability 15%, or 2085 with probability 85%. So a great suggestion. So thanks again to Bio for hosting us and to providing. I think there's still a few beers and drinks around. Let's get into some really nitty-gritty discussions now. Thanks to all of you for coming and such a warm day and being part of such a warm and important discussion. All the best.